Hello. I was so I so much enjoyed chatting to Caolan Robertson, exchanging messages, and he was on Julia Hartley Brewer's show today, and I'm going to play some of that because I think it's instructive, and he is brilliant, and he got the best out of Julia, and actually made me like her. I so enjoyed their conversation, their spat. I think it's one of the best bits of television that I have seen recently, and I commend it to you on TalkTV of all things. And, Julia Hartley Brewer, she's not somebody I watch often. In fact, I would run a mile normally rather than watch her, and I've changed my mind. I'm going to watch her avidly now. I think she was wonderful, but she's been filtered through Caolan. And we were talking about Suella Braverman, and I thought there were three major issues. The first is that one wants to blame her for everything, but she can't be blamed for everything because a lot of the time she was a mouthpiece for a particular group of people, a faction, and a fairly unfiltered, unthinking mouthpiece at that. It's as if she has no filter between what she's told and what she says. It just comes straight out. And is this something to do with her nebulous mentor, John Hayes, Sir John Hayes? I don't know. But these people have enabled her in the same way as she has enabled the right wing thugs to collect in Whitehall, in Chinatown, in Pimlico, and frighten and threaten the peaceful march that was taking place on Saturday. There were a lot of threats going on Saturday, and a lot of people feeling frightened and threatened. So it wasn't just the marchers who were feeling intimidated by these right-wing thugs. There were also the Jewish community, and I'm so pleased Julia Hartley Brewer brings up that, and so did Caolan. I had chats with people who were worried about St John's Wood Synagogue. I know it well, and they people were terrified. No one should be terrified. And there was green and red smoke outside, and people shouting and chanting, and they needed police protection. No one should be put in fear of their life on our streets. The second point about Suella was her dreams and her nightmares, and the idea that someone should define their political career by their dreams is absurd. But that led to serious diplomatic issues with Albania and with Pakistan. She never apologized, as far as I know, to Eddie Rama or to Crown Prince Lekka. And her comments led to her standing at the dispatch box screaming, invader, led to that huge Albanian march last year at the same time, just before the Remembrance Sunday. And, she was criticised for that as well last year. It's as if history is replaying itself and getting worse and worse each year. One couldn't possibly endure another year of Suella Braverman. Thank God she's gone. And then the nightmare, the endless legal wrangles over Rwanda. You have to say that one very slowly. And even if it works, and we should learn that by Wednesday from the Supreme Court, there were still major problems that will need to be dealt with about who would take legal responsibility if Rwanda slips into war with its neighbours, or into civil war with itself, or indeed if more migrants are shot, because Rwanda has a rather slippy trigger finger. 13 migrants shot in February 2018, and no real explanation, no real report. Something Suella seemed not to know about when she was interviewed on the BBC on a Sunday morning. I can't remember how many months ago it was now. But she feigned ignorance. Well, ignorance doesn't cut it. She's supposed to be in charge. And there have been comments about how lazy she has been as Home Secretary. Yeah, that's interesting. Thirdly, the bitter finger pointing, the tense, the cenotaph, the rhetoric that marks her, her time as Home Secretary masks her failure. And then just her idea that, we're going to have more hotels, throw more money at it, and hope it works. These deals with a variety of second-rate hotel chains that are now sitting pretty because they've got money from the Home Office for the foreseeable future. It's outrageous that we are spending money because of, and this again, I don't want to exonerate her too much, but this goes back to Theresa May's hostile environment and the go slow from the Home Office. And if you've had anything to do with the Home Office, you know how miserable it is. They all contradict each other. Nothing happens. You have endless conversations. Why? To get something very simple done. And Suella Braverman leading with a level of stupidity and arrogance and saying that she wants to test the law. To test the law. The only people who test the law are burglars and thieves and criminals. That's what you do when you test the law. It's outrageous. And she's tested conventions. Her car fine, her garrulity, her blabbing, maybe to Sir John Hayes. I don't know who she was talking to. And then she says, oh, that's technical breach of a ministerial code. Technical breach. Well, a technical breach is a breach. It's like when somebody goes shoplifting and says, oh, it's just a technical problem. No, it's a serious problem. She was dishonourable on a multitude of times, and she undermined Rishi's commitment to integrity, which is how he defined himself on the steps of Number 10, and almost all the problems that he has suffered since then have been down to Suella Braverman. And, let's listen to what Caolan's got to say. So much better at this than I am.
Well, joining me now to talk about all of this is Caolan Robertson. He's a journalist and co-founder at Byline TV. Good afternoon to you. Thank you for joining us. Now, I must point out also, you are somebody who used to work with Tommy Robinson. You also worked with the US conspiracy theorist Alex Jones as well. You've gone around a range of different people. Tommy Robinson, I must ask about him first. He was among those who was staging part of those counter-protests on Saturday. They got a lot of criticism for being there. And then suddenly, when things started kicking off, getting into a taxi, covered, ironically, in LGBTQ rainbows, and disappearing from the scene to head back to his island home abroad. Just first of all, why do you think the right-wingers, not right-wingers, the far-right, ex-EDL types, why do you think they turned up on Saturday? Were they genuinely concerned? You worked with these people. Were they genuinely concerned about the cenotaph being desecrated, being defaced and under attack?
Well, knowing those types of people, the reason the far right were there was because of the rhetoric from Suella Braverman, who said that the police were favouring the Palestinian side. They were letting them get away with illegal activities, who pitted the police against each other.
It's all on video.
Who made the police's job really, really difficult, who called the other side a hate march, who basically made it seem like there was going to be sort of terrorist sympathy and massive amounts of Hamas support allowed all over London.
But there had been for the previous 4 weeks.
No, but it wasn't. Yeah, it wasn't allowed in the previous 4 weeks, and the police have openly said recently as well that Suella made their job more difficult because of her rhetoric, because she basically would rather have the far right there than people who are pro-Palestine.
Why would she rather have the far right there?
Because her views are far more aligned with that. If you look at the rhetoric she's put out, of course they are. The Rwanda policy is extremely right-wing, of course.
So an ethnic minority Home Secretary married to a Jewish man would rather have the far right. She's sympathetic to their views. She's got more in common with Tommy Robinson than someone marching
Julia,
supposedly for peace.
Those people are there for Suella Braverman. Joe Politics interviewed them, and they all said that she was great. It was her rally call that got them there. It wasn't really Tommy Robinson.
You're saying that if Suella Braverman hadn't written that article for the Times, obviously, bearing in mind, of course, these people are all avid readers of the Times newspaper.
They don't read
If
the
she'd have
Times,
put-
but they can see
No,
it. But we know how the news works. If you write something in the Times, it's screenshotted on Twitter, the headlines get put out, they see that rhetoric. They see that.
They'd have all been happily at the, trailing their wives around the local shop.
But why is this happening now? Why are we seeing the far rights on the street now? Tommy's been around for years. We haven't seen this in the last few years on our streets. We're seeing it now because of the recent rhetoric from Suella Braverman.
I think we've seen
That's why we're seeing it now. And I think a lot of hosts who are complicit in this, a lot of right-wing media, the guest that you had on your show on Friday, Douglas Murray, said that the cenotaph was going to be, on Thursday, was going to be desecrated. They were going to be nowhere near that. So right-wing TV hosts and the right-wing government have facilitated this, allowed it, and now they're all saying, oh, no, it wasn't Suella, it wasn't any of us, it was Tommy Robinson,
previous
it was the EDL.
marches have been around Whitehall. The march wasn't around Whitehall because they're doing security preparations ahead of Remembrance Sunday, so that wasn't going to be allowed. But previously, they would have been. The march, we were told, was going to be a couple of hours. It wasn't going to start till a couple of hours after as well. People were well on the streets around 11 o'clock in the morning, long, around when people were marking Armistice Day at 11 o'clock and our fallen heroes. People were on the streets. I do not hold a candle for the far right, for the racists, for Tommy Robinson. Any of those people, got no time for them at all. They just create more problems, and a lot of them just frankly want to ruck.
Quite apart from changing the subject here, Julia Hartley Brewer is bringing up something quite interesting, because The Guardian did an article about this, and they talked to a person called Ben Neal, who said, I'm here in case the jihadis get past the police, who'll probably just let them through anyway. If they do come, they'll wish they hadn't. I mean, that is the language of having been incited, of defending Armistice Day, defending the cenotaph after 103 years. It's never needed defending before. My goodness. Anyway, let's get back to what she's saying and get back to Caolan.
Football, they just want to have a
And
run.
Suella gave an excuse.
She
basically said it was allowed.
They didn't. No,
she said they could go to the cenotaph and the Palestinians weren't allowed to. She allowed it.
The excuse was given to them by the failure of the police to actually take on the Islamist, the pro-Hamas, the anti-Semitic people
so you want the police to do a better job, right?
Those pro-Palestinian.
You want the police to do a better job, yes? You're a fan of law and order.
Well, no, I want the police to do their job.
Are you a fan of
their job?
Are you a fan of the police doing a good job and there being law and order?
Yes.
Well, then you should hate what Suella's done, which is to undermine them. That's why their jobs are becoming more difficult.
They didn't. No, they did. Their job wasn't undermined by Suella Braverman.
You championed her the whole time. You said that she's great. You started the show this morning by saying that she said nothing wrong. She's done nothing wrong.
That's not true.
Because you built her up and now you don't want to take responsibility for
Caolan, that's not true. I was very critical of some of her language she used. I said the language comparing it with marches in Northern Ireland and the use of the term hate marches. I was very, very critical of her.
But you tweeted on Saturday that there were hate marches. Jess Phillips said hate marches and you said yes.
Hate march, and I went, yes, because there were...
So you agree there are hate marches?
No, because... No, they are not all hate
Yes, no, but, well.
marchers. I've said repeatedly, I think most of the people on that march genuinely believe that they are campaigning for peace. They don't want babies to die in hospitals in Gaza.
So then why did you
I think
call them
there
hate
are a
marches?
useful lot of... There are useful idiots who are just, frankly, sixth-form politics debating people who don't understand. And I think, yes, there is a large minority of people who are anti-Semitic, troublemakers, pro-Hamas, and dangerous people.
Who were the mass?
And the
who were
police
the
were
majority
doing
of
nothing
people?
about
Who were
them.
the majority of people arrested?
Oh,
on
this is
Saturday?
good.
What side was the majority arrested?
But
Which side?
If the police only
It was
tackled
the
the
right-wing
right-wingers,
side.
then what a surprise! The far right, that they're the people who are going to be arrested. We've got footage after footage of people on the pro-Palestinian side saying kill Jews, carrying anti-Semitic placards, shouting chants from the river to the sea, anti-Semitic chants. And the police doing nothing about it.
Because their jobs are being made more difficult by the Home
Michael
Secretary.
Gove through a station, no arrests for that.
Because
and
their
you're
jobs
saying,
have been
well,
made-
most of the arrests were the far right, so they must have been the troublemakers. If you don't arrest people on one side, then yes, funnily enough, there'll be more arrests on the other
But you're
side.
not on the side of the police. You're on the side of Suella Braverman, who makes
I'm
their
on the
lives more
side of...
difficult.
I'm not on the side of the police, I'm on the side of law and order.
But you've just
in
said the
this
solution to
country.
this is to give the police more power to take control of this and to deal with
No,
the
government said
anti-Semitic
the
chant.
solution
The
was they don't
anti-Semitic
need
chant.
more powers to arrest people who are breaking the law.
I'm not defending
they have
it.
all the powers they need.
I'm not some lefty here defending the pro-Palestinian march. I wouldn't go on that march. I don't even subscribe to that kind of politics. And the chants that they were putting out, the anti-Semitic chants, my Jewish friends were horrified. They should be dealt with by the police.
Why
the
weren't
full
they
force
dealt
of
with
the
on
law.
the day?
Because their jobs were made more difficult by the Home
there
Secretary,
were
and they admit that
No,
in the press.
there were
They
no
said
far
that.
right on the streets the last 4 weeks. And I, like you, my Jewish friends and family members, absolutely horrified and terrified, won't let their children go into central London. Those last 4 weeks, the police weren't dealing with Suella Braverman's rhetoric. What was their excuse for those first 4 weeks?
The first 4 weeks were more and more difficult. She basically whipped everyone up into a frenzy. She said that they were hate marchers and the very small number of people.
What was the excuse for the first 4 weeks?
The first 4 weeks was the fact that Israel's
failure to arrest those people.
The reason that they're all there is because Israel's been bombing Gaza and destroying children in hospitals. So a lot of people go out in the streets they don't want to see. Well, I mean, they have.
What was the excuse for the police not acting and not arresting people at the moment where they commit those blatant crimes? Journalist after journalist can find these people, and suddenly the police surrounding them, apparently completely unable to see or hear.
Well, they took action after. A lot of the time, our police forces aren't equipped to understand some of the Islamic slogans that we first saw on the streets, some of the flags. And actually, when it was highlighted on Twitter what these things were, what these symbols were, they took action and they went after those people. It was just because
a handful of people.
But those were but only a handful of people were.
There's plenty of footage.
There's 10 people on Saturday.
There's way more than a handful of people chanting those things and people walking happily by. I'm just saying, if I walked happily by someone, shouting death to Jews who had a swastika on his arm and was a far right person, you would rightly say, how dare you stand there and allow that to happen? If you're walking down the road alongside people who are shouting death to Jews, I'm sorry, you are part of that.
Yes, but also what's part of that is the guests who have been on this show and parts of our government that have facilitated and encouraged those far-right people to go to the cenotaph.
So pointing out facts is facilitating and encouraging the far-right. I mean, you probably argue...
They're not facts. They're not facts because Douglas Murray saying on this show with you nodding along that they're going to desecrate the cenotaph is not facts.
No, I didn't nod along to him saying they're going to. He said there is a risk of that. That is what...
But that's not facts.
No, we've already seen... We have already...
That's not facts.
We have already seen a war memorial desecrated with Free Palestine put on it. We've already seen flags draped on the very first march. I think it was the first or the second march.
I know there are many issues which can be levelled against her. We could list her faults. But can even even Julia Hartley Brewer doesn't have the ability to list her achievements. What are her achievements? What has she actually managed to do? As far as I know, there's only two big laws that she's actually got through. One was the Nationality and Borders Act, which came in just after she admitted to Tim Lawton in a Commons committee room on the 22nd of November that the only way for a legitimate and certain male refugee to travel to the UK in order to in order to claim refuge here would be to go by in an illegal route and take a boat, a small boat, across the channel and then claim asylum when he got to the other side. It's extraordinary that she has to admit that. It's on camera. It's there. And the Illegal Migration Act 2023, which means that what she was saying would be now impossible, because however, so if you come to the UK by an illegal route, then that automatically debars you from claiming asylum. That's in contravention of the 1951 Refugee Convention that we are signatories to. And we can't turn around and say, oh, you have to stay in the first safe country that you come to, because that's part of Dublin III, and the people who were negotiating Brexit were too lazy and too stupid to actually find or negotiate a replacement for Dublin III. That was their fault. That was the fault of Brexit. And as for leaving the ECHR, this is madness. The ECHR is a small aspect of that. The real issue is the 1951 Refugee Convention. Oh, and by the way, I enjoyed the fact that she talked, Julia Hartley Brewer talked initially about Caolan's relationship with Tommy Robinson, but she then didn't go on to deal with that because, Tommy Robinson was followed and recorded throughout his time around Whitehall and Soho by Maya Tousi, and the evidence is plain. Whatever he may have done on social media, he behaved with dignity and innocence, meek as a lamb during the 2 hours that he was there being filmed, negotiating with police to get to the cenotaph. And then the GB News programme, that sort of sister channel to TV Times or whatever it's called, TalkTV, claimed that he'd thrown objects at the police. it was a nonsense and possibly libelous. The evidence is clear. Whatever he may have done on social media is an entirely different matter. But Caolan is quite right. The buck stops with the Home Secretary. It was the Home Secretary who was inciting these people. The Home Secretary, who herself enabled, was herself enabling.
Where we saw the protest, it was set up next to the cenotaph. It was inappropriate. It's not the normal form. Sam Armstrong, over to you. You're desperate to get it.
I'm so glad that Caolan's worked it all out. There was no far right until Suella Braverman, the first Buddhist ethnic minority female Home Secretary this country's ever had, came along and she decided she was going to send Tommy Robinson and all of the rest of it subtle, imperceptible secret messages.
It wasn't very imperceptible. It was pretty clear. It was pretty clear.
Times of London. It's hardly the far-right journal of record to go to. This is where it gets mad. There is this huge leap between Suella Braverman saying and pointing out something that lots of people are feeling and the far-right turning up. Many of them don't like her, and it's unfair to say that many of them do like her. And we saw horrible racist attacks directed against Suella Braverman. And there is a madness in this country if we don't think that the far right were likely to have been upset all by themselves at the sight of Islamist extremists committing terrorist offences, threatening to march past the cenotaph on, of all days, Armistice Days. You are lying to people when you say that they were emboldened. Come on, what does that mean?
If the far right are given an opportunity to take to the streets, and if they are told that the police will be on their side, the police aren't going to be upholding law and order by the Home Secretary, they will take that opportunity and they will commit violence. That is why this has happened.
No.
It has nothing to do with Tommy or any of these distractions.
I'm not defending what they did at all. They just don't help anyone's cause, except people who want to criticise them and quite rightly criticise them for what they've done. However, the key thing is it wasn't they felt that the police weren't taking action. The police weren't taking action. The police were offering two-tier policing. Sorry, if the police were acting so perfectly, why on earth were so many Jewish people afraid to be in town? If the police were acting so perfectly, why were people not arrested for chanting pro-Hamas slogans? If the police were acting correctly, why was Sir Mark Rowley, the Met Chief, dragged into Downing Street by the Home Secretary, the Prime Minister, given a dressing down and told to deal with this? No, he couldn't persuade Mark Rowley to actually ban this march. Now, look, I didn't actually call for this march to be banned. I said, if it's late on in the day and it's on the other side of London, but it's properly policed, that's fine. But it's never ever acceptable that there should be any sort of protest or march in any city, any town or city in this country where the way that people are behaving is intimidating to other people, not people taking offence or not agreeing with them. I'm very happy for people to do marches I disagree with. But if there are a constituency of people in this country who are scared because of their ethnicity and their religion, because of what some of these people on these marches are doing, and by the way, these marches, some of the organisers are ex-Hamas, for God's sake. They're from a proscribed terrorist organisation. There's a clue about what their aims are. If that is going on, the police have a duty to act.
Yes,
and to say that this is all rhetoric and stirring up is a nonsense.
But everything you said is correct, right up until the last point, which is that the police need to take action. But you're supporting a woman that undermines the police. So it totally counteracts.
How does Suella Braverman, the Home Secretary as was, it was literally her job to oversee what the police do. How does her saying, I want the police to do the job they're paid to do to protect all the people in this country. How is that undermining the police?
She said that they were picking sides, and she said that they weren't going to uphold law and order. Okay, so then the police spokespeople who said that they undermined them, they're lying, they're crazy.
No, but hang on.
We shouldn't listen to the police spokespeople. We should just listen to each other on our social media.
You've admitted that the police have a policy with Islamists to look at what is said, arrest later, not at the time. In part, they say, the police, they do that to prevent disorder at the time.
They don't have enough police to deal with that many people.
It would cause disorder if they were to arrest at the time. With the far right, they take a different approach. They preemptively arrest. They arrested, I think, 75 people in Pimlico to prevent a breach of the peace. Those two approaches are worlds apart. Now, I'm not saying those approaches are wrong, but that is two-tier policing. That is, one is being arrested before the fact to prevent the breach of the peace. The other is not even being arrested at the time because there would be disorder.
I mean,
That is two-tier policing.
Also, the reason those people were preemptively arrested is because they were the ones who already started the violence at 10 o'clock in the morning before anyone else had arrived, and they'd already been throwing bottles.
No, but hang on, answer my question. Is that two-tier policing? Are there two tiers operating there?
Well, there's an entirely parallel system where there's the police trying to do their job and the Home Secretary trying to undermine them. There aren't any other things. There's a difficulty when you're policing because
just admit it. Just admit
they policed those two different groups of people completely differently, and you know why they did it differently, and we know why they did it differently, but we're not allowed to say it out loud.
One is waving signs in different languages that take a little bit longer to figure out, and one are people throwing bottles at the police.
From the river to the sea is in English.
That's also not illegal to say from the river to the sea. That's not an illegal chant, and it's not an arrestable.
It's the chant of a terrorist organisation.
I agree with you. It's disgusting, but it's not illegal, and it's also not as explicit as throwing a bottle at the police and doing a bag of coke and having a big punch up at the senator.
Saying, oh, let's kill all Jews. That's quite explicit. That was happening.
And those people should be thrown in prison.
Outside a synagogue near my home, actually haranguing people and shouting abuse at people who were leaving the synagogue. Families having to be escorted by police. I wasn't in London on Saturday night. Otherwise, I would have driven down there and helped to make sure those people were safe myself. I'm absolutely appalled by what was going on. We've seen footage after footage, video footage after video footage, where you can see that the police, even when they themselves are being pushed. The Michael Gove, the footage taken by Andy Noah, a previous guest, the Michael Gove being chanted at and pushed at, police having to push people back.
Again,
you don't see the police grabbing those people and arresting those people.
And it's the poliese themselves who are saying that they have been undermined by the Home Secretary. But I agree with you right up until that last point.
Writing an article for the Times mean you can't arrest people who are threatening a bloody cabinet minister walking through a train station in this country.
They're being undermined by the Home Secretary.
Oh, my God, Caolan. Yeah. God, I got to stop shouting too much on this show. But genuinely, Caolan Robertson, I really appreciate you coming in. He's with Byline at TV now. He was there. Saw some of the events on the day. Thank you very much. Calm, breathe, everybody. Caolan, it is like double. It is Orwellian.
Yeah, I think isn't that great? Isn't that great? And that the energy in that debate. If there's someone to hold responsible for the problems of this last weekend, but a series of problems going back over the last year for the 126 arrests, or actually more. I think Julia was saying there's 150 arrests now. The majority of them were right-wing, from the counter-protesters in Pimlico, in the Cenotaph in Chinatown. It's the former Home Secretary Suella Braverman, whose job it was to instill unity, cohesion and safety. And instead she spat derision, fear, hatred. And we saw exactly that a year ago during the Albanian march, the anniversary of which, the day before Remembrance Sunday last year. So it's not the first time that she's brought people out in their thousands onto the streets. And does anybody feel safer because of her rhetoric? Does anybody feel safer? No. Does the Jewish community feel safer because of her rhetoric? No. And demonstrably not. People were escorted home from the St. John's Wood Synagogue, as Julia Hartley Brewer points out. My friends were escorted home. It's simply shocking. I mean, I wish Julia Hartley Brewer would have given Caolan a little bit more time to expound his arguments rather than cutting in. But that cutting in left a degree of energy to that debate which I haven't seen for a very, very long time. I mean, he should definitely be given a key role on mainstream television. I mean, he's spectacular, but we were talking about what are the achievements of Suella Braverman. I think there are six. First is the hotel expense. I mean, she's made a lot of hoteliers very happy and very comfortable with pretty awful hotels. I've stayed in some of them, and they're pretty ropey. Secondly, the tent fiasco. This is extraordinary, particularly when we know that many veterans are living in tents. Particularly that we know that people who were wrongly detained in prison. Do I mention the word Malkinson? Living in a tent. In Spain, but nevertheless living in a tent. Because he still hasn't been given the money that he is owed by our government, and he wasn't seen at any point. Suella Braverman could have called him in to say, look, I'm sorry, but she didn't. 3 is her irregular behaviour, her breaches of the ministerial code. Not only the business with her trying to get the ministry to pay for her car fines, but also her garrulity, her talking to Sir John. Sir John makes him sound rather like some sort of pompous, over-egged, inflated character from Shakespeare. Number 4. The diplomatic crises that she engineered, that she created with Albania and with Pakistan. No apologies, no meetings. Number 5, her Rwanda obsession. Too many unanswered questions, whether it goes ahead, whether it's approved by the Supreme Court or not. You cannot base your country's security on a dream. Number 6, and this is the one that I think she will go down in history for, is her the disaster with the police. She's nominally in charge, or she was nominally in charge, and no amount of retooling her Twitter profile yesterday, no amount of putting photographs of her sitting with police on top of her Twitter feed can excuse the level of damage that she has done to the relationship between the government and the police. And that will take years, decades, I think, to recover, to restore, to rebuild. And that is down to 1 year of this